Now, it's no secret that real estate on the Nintendo Switch eShop is at an all-time premium, partly due to the fact that only 6 games can be viewed at any one time when scrolling through its multitude of menus, but mainly because there are just so many games released each week. One thing is for certain though, every Switch publisher on the eShop is vying for your attention. Now, some of these publishers do things legit. They make a decent thumbnail to grab your attention, have honest game listings with legitimate screenshots and descriptions, and hope that you like what you see. Whilst others such as the scammers attempt to coax you in with highly embellished descriptions and trailers and screenshots which oversell what they have to offer. But as you can probably tell from this video's title, we're not here to talk about those folks today. No, today we're looking at another kind of publisher. The kind that wants to grab as much real estate as possible, like a property developer buying up a rundown council estate. And there are in fact several of them, including both Baltoro Games and Cubic Games to a lesser degree. But for this example, I've decided to pick on the most prolific of all, that being RedDeerGames. Now, you may think that I'm burning bridges here and possibly shooting myself in the foot with this video, but before we get into it, I want to say that RedDeerGames are a publisher who in the past have put out a lot of decent games and still do, several of which I've thoroughly enjoyed and covered with reviews. In October of 2021, however, they released a little title known as AAA Clock, and from here things steadily went downhill after they discovered that quantity far outweighs quality when it comes to selling games. Now, if you scroll through the latest releases section at any point in the past year or so, then you're guaranteed to have encountered a RedDeerGames title. And in fact, looking back from today's date, even if you weren't aware, you're likely to have seen one every single week, or on some occasions, every couple of days, or even daily. To illustrate this though, here's a little snapshot of what the eShop's recent releases look like for the past week alone, with the RedDeerGames titles highlighted with a pink border. And looking back at the past 3 months, here are all the dates in which they published something new to the eShop. Now, you may be thinking that with this period being on the run up to Christmas, of course they were going to put out an increased number of games in order to maximise profits. But in fact, they've been doing this throughout the entirety of 2023, on some occasions under 2 different publishing names, when in March of 2023 they switched over from publishing under RedDeerGames to RedDeer.Games. Bear in mind though that these are just the days on which they published something, and on most of them there were multiple releases, but almost every Friday of the year you're guaranteed to see a new RedDeerGames title. Looking at the bigger picture though, we can see that between January 2020 and January 2024, RedDeerGames published a total of 174 titles, while RedDeer.Games published 360, with a majority of them coming in 2023 when they took over as the main publishing name. Combined though, this comes to 534 titles, meaning that their releases alone contribute to around 3.6% of all content ever published on the Switch eShop since its release in March of 2017. And that might seem like a relatively small number until you consider the fact that there are over 14,500 games and Game Plus DLC bundles available on the eShop. And from what I've seen, this means they're by far the biggest contributor to the eShop, unless somebody can tell me otherwise. As you can see from this graph though, the number of releases has grown exponentially since 2020, and bear in mind that these figures don't include the standalone DLC content that they've been releasing, and in fact the vast majority of them are not actually new games at all. So if they're not releasing new titles, then what are they releasing? Well, if you've got even a shred of intelligence, you probably know the answer to this one. But RedDeerGames and the other publishers that I've mentioned appear to have discovered a bit of a loophole, or dare I say exploit, in the way that the eShop treats new releases. While standalone DLC content doesn't appear to be listed in the recent releases, or does but then vanishes after a set time period, releasing a game plus the DLC content as a bundle counts as an entirely new release, and so does show up in the list of recent releases. And this is where we come full circle back once again to the release of AAA Clock. In October of 2021, the original AAA Clock was unleashed on the eShop, and at the time it was somewhat of a novelty, garnering attention from several content creators primarily due to its extortionate pricing. But over the following years, RedDeerGames would capitalise on its success, releasing new downloadable themes for the clock, which they would then go on to repackage as Clock Plus DLC bundles, giving them catchy titles such as Extended Edition, Extreme Deluxe and Ultra Superb Edition. To date though, AAA Clock has been released a sum total of 37 times, with a new one coming almost every month, with all but a couple of these being game and DLC bundles. And this particular publishing strategy has gone on to be used with many of RedDeerGames' other titles, including NOS New Operating System, of which there are 16 different variants, Piano Learn and Play, which has 14 versions, Pixel Paint and Pixel Paint 2, which between them have 20 different versions, and Hentai World with 13 versions of the game published so far, but the list goes on and on. The most ridiculous aspect of all of this though is that the majority of these bundles contain the exact same DLC content, just in different combinations, and in several instances the DLC is free anyway. But this makes it almost impossible to identify what the most cost-effective version is, while simultaneously giving them the ability to republish the games a near infinite amount of times. Going back to the point of this entire video though, what it all comes down to is visibility on the eShop, and with this publishing strategy, RedDeerGames have all but guaranteed that you'll see the releases, if not the first time, then the 12th or 13th time. There is of course nothing illegal about what they're doing, and even if there was, Nintendo have already shown that they don't really give a shit about the eShop or consumer right laws for that matter. But at the very least it's immoral, and in my opinion the most blatant misuse of publishing rights that the eShop has ever seen. In closing though, what can be done to stop it? Well, from what I can see there are really only two solutions here. Either Nintendo steps in and limits publishers to releasing a specific number of games per month, or make it so that game and DLC combos don't appear on the recent releases list like standalone DLCs, or alternatively, RedDeerGames do the right thing and stop republishing the same titles over and over. But it's highly unlikely that either of these things will ever happen. Prior to making this video, I did attempt to reach out to RedDeerGames via email, expressing my concerns about the practices and posing a number of different questions to them, but as was to be expected I received no response. So if you happen to be watching this video, RedDeerGames, maybe you'd like to comment on your actions and perhaps even justify them and explain why you think they're necessary. It really is a shame though that reputable publishers are having to resort to such extreme measures, but even more so that small indie developers that could really benefit from exposure on the eShop are getting lost amongst the asset flippers, scammers, and now over-publishers. With that said though, what do you all think about these kind of publishing practices? Do you think they're warranted? Do you see them as an issue? And how would you suggest that we solve the problem? As always, let me know down in the comments section below. For now though, drop a like if you enjoyed this one, and consider checking out my Scam Games playlist and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. But until next time, thanks to the patrons of the channel and to you the viewers for watching, take care of yourselves and game on.